Well, Kenya's election is making regional and international headlines. Let's get more perspective on what's going on in Kenya. And I'm joined by Rafael Obonyo. He's a convener from the Youth Congress. I'm also joined by Dr. Alex Owiti, Director, East Africa Institute, Aga Khan University. Dr. Peter Kagwanja, he's the CEO, Africa Policy Institute. And Daisy Amdani, she's the ED Kron Trust. Welcome all of you to the program. I'll start off with you, and I want to get to your key issues first of all, because this is Kenya's fourth multi-party election, and it is moving at a rather dramatic speed this time around. In your view, what are the key issues that are emerging in this election?
I think, first of all, I mean, election is an important moment for us to sort of have a transition when it comes to leadership. But for these particular elections, I think for me the key issue is youth. We look at youth in terms of being the largest demographic in the country. 80% of the population of Kenya is below age 35. So if you look at it in terms of demographic, then we talk youth becomes a major factor. If you look at it in terms of the voting bloc, 51% according to the electoral agency, 51% of the registered voters are actually young people. That's a voting bloc that is required. But then the third thing which is important is the voting issues. Especially for young people, so that young people are not just numbers, but what are they looking up to? I think the question of youth unemployment. So young people are hoping that the leadership that is going to come on board will address the question of things like unemployment, things like education, you know, things like affordable healthcare and all that stuff. And so asking young people to register to vote is one thing, but asking them to sort of identify the issues why they're voting is actually important, and that's why we are saying youth should look at
youth issues are top of the agenda. Dr. Awiti, your take.
So what I think is that this could have been a consequential election in many ways, because the country has an opportunity to make fundamental evaluations of the past 4 years. This is the first inside 4 years of implementing a new constitution, looking at devolution. What has worked, what hasn't worked? What are the intergovernmental relations between the counties and the national government? Are we close to a joint government? The fundamental questions about the economy, especially the debt question, the GDP debt ratio. There are many arguments that can be made about fiscal management that needed to have been made in this election. They're consequential going forward. Some of the projections that I've seen suggest that we still need a huge financial outlay to just rig the infrastructure that we need to drive the economy forward. So the real questions really are about the welfare dividends of the growth that we've seen today.
Right.
Where is that dividend?
Where is that dividend? That ties in with the youth unemployment and that demographic. Dr. Kagwanya, your take.
I am a little bit more optimistic in the sense that the economy that has emerged from 2002 and which seems to be growing that direction favors the youth other than the old generation. Agriculture is declining, but this economy, for example, in Kenya and Africa generally, is IT driven. This economy is communication driven, and the people who are basically able to get there are the young people. I think this election itself is going to be decided by the youth. Right. And the issue facing, the issue really determining whether they would tilt the balance in one side or another is about how they feel about their future and which political formation is going to inspire their imagination about a brighter future. Because as we stand now, we're facing the main problem or contradiction of globalization, which is basically a very fast growth, and that's which Dr. Awita has talked about, and very little trickle effect on the society. We're going to look at that trickle effect, and a few key issues are emerging here. That the economy, despite the growth of the economy over the last 4 years, though the trickle down effect is not being felt. But first, let's get your view, Daisy.
Well, for me, my perspective for this election is how women are performing, because when we talk about envisioning a new Kenya, that's what we did in 2010. And one of the integral parts of that 2010 constitution in envisioning a new Kenya was the inclusivity principle, with women being included in leadership and decision making. And it's been an uphill task in terms of being able to get the necessary legislation to guarantee that exclusion. But having said that, we've seen some strides that women have made especially during the nomination process, and we have women vying for governorship, and it's a very exciting time because before we didn't see that kind of showing by women, and so everybody's really looking out. How many governors are we going to get who are going to be controlling county budgets? But having said that, and even though Dr. Kagwanja speaks of declining agriculture, that is also one of the areas that we are very concerned about and that needs to be addressed also within the political discourse at this time. And the issue of food security is a major problem because we've had serious food shortages and a disconnect between policy and outputs, and this for us is very concerning as women because 80% of the labor force in the agricultural sector is actually provided by women, and so the poverty rates that we see there are so high. So how then do we integrate women into that, into the growing economy, but also focusing on agriculture? Because while we speak about ICT-driven and technology-driven, let's not forget that people must eat. People must eat, so you need to have a guarantee of food security. So how then do we integrate women into those chains to ensure that women become a key component of food security in Kenya? Looking
at the issues that have been raised here, and we often tend to look at Kenya's position in isolation here, but in comparison though with the region, and I'll start here with your youth unemployment, in comparison with the region in terms of Kenya's unemployment figures, which according to the World Bank stand at about 22.2% compared to, like, let's say the big economies like South Africa, Nigeria or Egypt. Is Kenya's unemployment rate extremely high or in comparison? Amongst the youth, I think unemployment in Kenya is much higher compared to other, the neighboring countries, whether you talk of Rwanda, Tanzania, or even Uganda. But Kenya has also come up with models to address youth unemployment in some way. We have a youth fund, which is acclaimed as one of the most innovative kind of a program within the region, and a couple of others. But I think our problem comes in we create hope, but it's false hope, because we have good models, but we never make them work for young people. So while we can tackle unemployment, the programs that we've created have been sort of mismanaged. Leadership of those programs do not necessarily have youth at heart or youth issues at heart. Right, Dr. Kagwanja, you did talk about youth being the future for Kenya, though. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree in a sense that youth unemployment in Kenya could be higher in the sense that Kenya's population has grown faster than the neighbors. If you look at the recent growth, there's really a jumping of the population. And of course, you've seen the expansion of the university sector, particularly in this country, to the point that University of Nairobi alone is graduating about 16,000 people in a year, 8,000 each of the two graduations. And that's 1 out of 67 universities, both private and public, mixed. Now, what that means is that the public sector, as currently constituted, can never accommodate these people. But the beautiful thing is that Kenya itself has never been what you can call a public sector economy. It's an informal sector economy. And I think it's how we rejig and kind of revamp the informal sector to absorb this population that's going to make a difference. Is that being done? You've mentioned the youth funds and other things, but this seems to be more oriented towards the elite among the youth, rather than the ordinary youths who do not know how to write a proposal, those who do not know how to do a business plan, and so on. So I think there need to be more flexibility about how to access support for the informal sector. Otherwise, the formal sector is not going to be the future. Dr. Awiti.
So I think we have fundamental structural problems with the economy. If you look at the rapid growth since 2002 to date, it's very difficult to appropriate how much of that is from domestic processes of manufacturing value addition. There's been a huge injection of external capital into the country to drive infrastructural projects. And that distorts those numbers. And I think that's why it's difficult to see the trickle down that we're looking for, because capital is stuck on these big, shiny things like roads and railways and ports and harbors. What we haven't done, as Desi said, is to figure out a way to create those structures that then enable the economy to work across all sectors. And this is what Africa is struggling with generally. We talked about Africa rising. Now everybody's wondering, rising for who? Not that rising tide isn't lifting all boats. It's not lifting all boats because we have failed in the imagination of those structural components that will then distribute those growth dividends much more equitably, especially to the rural women. For instance, some of the work that we've done.
If you go back and you're talking about having spent so much on infrastructure, when you look at developing countries and countries that are on the move, though, isn't this a prerequisite for development, that you must have the infrastructure?
It is a prerequisite. I'm not saying that we shouldn't spend the money, but what I'm saying is that it detracts from understanding the real dynamic of the economy, because then you're stuck at the top end of headline GDP, but you're not looking at the retail end of that, the everyday person, and how much value is created out of these infrastructural projects that then drives domestic value add. So we need to be more imaginative about how we drive forward the economy. Now, this is where we now need to figure out, does the political process address these fundamental challenges in terms of rejigging the economy, as you put it?
I'm going to put that question to Daisy. We've sat here and we are talking issues in this forum. You've talked about your challenges being about the youth. Yours is the economy, and yours is the youth being the future. And you're talking about issues of women. Are we not beginning to see an issue-driven electoral cycle, though, in Kenya?
Well, we are and we're not. Because one of the beauties of devolution is that it is forcing the issues, because having our leaders at the grassroots with the people has helped the people to at least interrogate them to some measure. And we've actually seen protest votes among the electorate at the grassroots level who are completely dissatisfied with the way the devolved governments and the devolved representatives have actually handled the resources or development in the area.
And we're going to continue with this discussion when we return from the break, because I want to get your insights into what Daisy is talking about. We'll take a short break here on the program. When we return, we will be interrogating Kenya's elections upcoming. Stay with us.